This is Shawnee Godwin, host of Joy Economics, and you're listening to Season 4, Episode 1, kicking off our new series celebrating the resilient power of small businesses. Up next, an invigorating interview with Elizabeth Giorgi, self-proclaimed badass and founder of two successful production companies, Soona and Mighteor.
It is our responsibility to say, what can I do fundamentally in my business? What can I do fundamentally for my community that will advance equality in a meaningful way that is sustainable and comes from a place of true alignment?
No doubt, starting a business is hard work. But staying in business, now that's an even tougher proposition. Well, our guest today, Elizabeth Giorgi, has successfully managed to do both as the founder of two innovative production companies. Not only is she passionate, but she's brave. And what's more, she's an inspiring lesson on how to make moves in your business while having the courage to take a stand. Her story is next.
Welcome to Joy Economics, creating better ways to live, work, and play. Our show will challenge the way we do business in the corporate world and provide listeners with the tools and know-how they need to find more joy at work and in life. And now, your host, Shawnee Godwin.
Hello, and welcome to Joy Economics, creating better ways to live, work, and play. I am your host, Shawnee Godwin, and today we are continuing our Pivot series. Initially started to talk about COVID and how small businesses and entrepreneurs across the country are pivoting their businesses so that they can not only survive COVID, but thrive in the midst of COVID. And before we've even gotten square out the gate, here comes the George Floyd murder and the outcry publicly across the country from people and businesses and organizations and entities that are upset and in protest. And so not only were we already reeling from COVID, but now 2020 is serving up a second opportunity for us to pivot. So I could not think of anyone else I wanted to have on the show other than my good friend, Liz Girogi. So Liz, welcome to the show today.
Shawnee, I am overjoyed to be on your show today. Thank you for having me.
This has been a long time coming.
It has, but I'm so glad it's happening now because in a strange way, we have both grown and changed so much since we've graduated from our program at 10,000 Small Businesses. And we have really been given an opportunity here to talk about how we can be creatively thoughtful and how we move forward. So it's a good time to talk.
It's the perfect time to talk. And one of the things about me is I've just truly learned to trust God's timing. There's like Shawnee's timing of when she wants people to come on and get things done in her life. And sometimes that happens the way I plan it in my head, and sometimes it doesn't. We literally were planning to do this episode, not this particular episode. And then COVID popped off back in March, and I had to call you and say, oh my God, we got to close the office today. It's a lot going on. Can we reschedule? And here we are, in our rescheduled moment, and we're in the middle of another crisis. And so I was like, you know what? We're doing it today. I am not canceling on her again. And honestly, what I said in the intro is true. I've watched you grow, Liz, from creating your growth plan in our program, executing that growth plan, creating new business streams of income for yourself, and just pivoting along the way. And I'll say it's looked amazing from the outside looking in, but as a business owner, I know that it hasn't been easy. I also know that you have come into some challenges where you've had to have some hard conversations. You've had to expose some things publicly. You've had to lean into some harsh realities of growth. And again, when I thought of someone who understood what it was like to pivot, and now us having to pivot for COVID and pivot our businesses so that we can respond properly, whatever that response is, to the George Floyd protests and the messaging that is going on in the country so that we can be part of the conversation and ensure that we do take some stance and put our stake in the ground somewhere. You just were the person who came to mind. So again, back to that perfect timing. We couldn't have scripted this any better, but I do think God has arranged this particular day, and you are that particular person that really can help us have a really thought-provoking conversation today. So I appreciate that about you.
Well, I can't wait to talk. And, more than anything, I am really honored that you would think of me, because I think that I have always, always had so much respect for entrepreneurs, and better than anyone what it takes to continually reinvent not just your business, but yourself for the way that the world responds to you. And even with this podcast, you have so gracefully pivoted the podcast to cover the realities of what we're doing right now. So I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Awesome. So let's get into it. I'm going to give the audience a little bit more about you. Elizabeth Liz Giorgi is an Emmy Award winner turned media entrepreneur. She is the founder of 2 successful production businesses, Soona and Mighteor. She is a passionate advocate for women in production and business, as well as a Tory Burch Foundation Fellow and board member for the Women Who Start Up Foundation. She and her co-founder created the Candor Clause as part of their startup to advance equality in venture capital. And she can be found on Instagram, loving on her pets, her small dog, her cat, her hubby, her new hubby. And more importantly, in the midst of all of that, she lives in Minneapolis, which, as we know, is the center of the Black Lives Matter protests. Not only is she an advocate, she is a personal friend of mine, an amazing entrepreneur, and we are really grateful to have you here today so that we can talk all things Soona, Mighteor, the protests, Black Lives Matters, pivoting, venture capital, equality, and all of the above. So let's just see where the universe takes us today and dive in. So let's start with, obviously, Minneapolis. You are living real time in the epicenter of not only where George Floyd was killed, but you're in the heart of the crisis that is at hand. Can you talk about how that's been for business, the impact it's had on you, and how you've chosen to integrate real time the landscape of the environment into business, and how do you do business and pivot a business in the middle of yet another crisis?
I think the thing that I try to always remember, and it's something that I was taught as a very young child, is that, listen, nothing changes in this world if nothing changes. And what I think we're seeing in Minneapolis, and honestly what we're seeing internally in our business, is that the status quo isn't working for everyone anymore. Everyone can't see me on this podcast, but I am a white woman. And I know that I walk through this earth, I walk through the Twin Cities, I walk through every part of my life with a certain amount of privilege. And the Twin Cities is a place that for a really long time has had the worst disparities between whites and everyone else. It is just a clear demarcation. You can look at education, you can look at economics. It doesn't matter what category you look at. We have consistently ranked as one of the worst places for those disparities. And I think what it has brought to mind for me is a couple things. First, it is our role, those of us who have a voice in our community, and I consider myself to be someone who has a voice in our community, to not just stand up and say, oh, I believe in Black Lives Matter, or I believe in the cause. It is our responsibility to say, what can I do fundamentally in my business? What can I do fundamentally for my community that will advance equality in a meaningful way that is sustainable and comes from a place of true alignment? And, for me, it was really clear. One, we got to do a better job of making sure that we are paying people what they deserve to be paid. We're helping the Black-owned businesses. We're working with the Black-owned businesses. We're partnering with them. And so I simply said right away to my team, we're going to dedicate all of our social channels, all of our social reach to Black-owned businesses. And that's what we're going to do this week. We're going to completely turn off our own marketing, and we're going to show off the work of our community. Second, you've got to be willing to have hard conversations inside your organization to say, how can we be a better company for the people of color inside of our organization? And so we've been having conversations off and on, long before this occurred. But really right now, the thing I'm hearing loud and clear from my team is we need time, we need opportunity to contribute, and we need space to really have these conversations with each other. And so that's what I've been trying to do. And that's what I think is my responsibility right now. But, Shawnee, I know that even I have more to learn. I know that even I don't see certain things. And I think being willing to say that is essential. It is essential, because that's what's going to cause change, is saying, I want to learn more. I'm going to put myself in position to learn more.
Right. And I thank you for saying that. It's funny because I had a conversation last night over text message with, honestly, like an ex-boyfriend from like high school. I don't even know how he popped up. And we got into this back and forth conversation about how I hurt him when I broke up with him when I went to college. And it was so interesting because that is not the story that I remember and have held and have carried. And the pain of this breakup stuck with me, but it was clear when we opened up this conversation that the pain of that breakup really stuck with him and informed and transferred his life. And the stuff that he was saying I did to him, when he said it, I was like, oh, you're right. I did break up with you. I did kind of set this in motion, but that was not the story in my head. And so I thought it was a beautiful exercise in opening up conversations and reality checking that there are always two sides to every story. A lot of times there is no absolute truth. A lot of times it's your story and your experience of what has happened against my story and my experience. And so it gave me a lot to think about, particularly in the backdrop of what's been going on this week. As much as I appreciate my white friends who are now starting to open up, not just their eyes, but their ears and their hearts to receive the stories, the experiences, the truths of their African American and people of color counterparts in their lives. I have learned this week by speaking up about my truth, which equally for me as a Black woman has been hard, because I'm going to be honest, when I really start to reflect, I've made my way successfully through corporate America by trying not to be intimidating, trying to make people comfortable, trying to not upset, not confront. And, it also is teaching me, if I allow it as a woman of color, as a Black leader, how do I engage in this conversation? What am I called to enlighten you to? What do I learn from you? I think we make our own assumptions about white people, why white people don't defend us, why they don't speak up for us. And some of it's true, but some of it, as I finally started to speak up, I got tons of support and messages from white friends and colleagues. And some of the messages were simply, I just don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know. It's not that I don't see it. I don't want to offend you. I don't want to make you mad. And so I think for real racial reconciliation to begin to happen, we have to be able to, as you said, kind of confront these things, confront our own unconscious biases, and really start to talk. And those conversations aren't always going to be comfortable. They're not going to be always what we believed going into the conversation. And if we just open our hearts and our ears, I know we can start to hear each other and move this thing forward. So I want to ask you, because I think you're no stranger to having to speak out about injustice and things that aren't as you would have them be. I put a quote on my Facebook page that I'm about to butcher, but I'm going to go for it anyway.
Go for it.
Don't come get me, Barack Obama, but it was a quote by Barack Obama, and it was something like, do we work for the world as it is, or the world? Do we want to work for the world as we believe it is, or as we believe it should be? That was the essence of the quote. And I see you as someone who really works to create the world as you believe it should be. I've seen you time and time again on your page take really clear stances on and have very strong opinions, but they're offered gracefully and graciously, yet they're very clear, like where you stand on things like the PPP loan and venture capitalists and some of the things that have happened to you. Can you share, like, where does that spirit come from, and why do you, like, you are a person who has succeeded. You don't have to take that risk and put yourself out there. And in a lot of ways, it's not in a lot of ways, it is just much more easy to keep your mouth shut and be quiet and not risk, the success that you've attained. But what can you tell us about, any of the op-ed pieces that resonate with you right now? I've seen you do it so frequently. I'll let you kind of share which ones make most sense.
I think the thing that I'm probably most well known for taking a stance on is sexism and the outright mistreatment of women in venture capital. I've been not only a really vocal proponent of addressing those issues, but I've put real and meaningful money and effort behind closing some of the loopholes that exist inside of venture that allow for bad actors to treat people with disregard, disrespect, and to outright abuse them. And, I think I appreciate so much your willingness to share. I think the thing that I have always come back to, I was a journalist by trade. So when I was going to college, I wanted to be Barbara Walters. That was my life's ambition. I really believed that being Barbara Walters was my path. I went to broadcast journalism school. And when I got to my senior year and was really getting a lot of feedback from networks about, get my potential as a anchor, a lot of the feedback that I received is I was just too harsh, or I was too brisk, and it was I wasn't friendly. I didn't come across as a warm, fuzzy person. And at the time I took a lot of issue with that, and it actually caused me to have completely pivot my career aspirations. I ended up transitioning more into the technical aspects of production, became an editor, became somebody who was more of a field producer and behind the camera. And that fundamentally changed the trajectory of my life. The feedback that, mostly white men gave me about myself caused me to change my own ambitions. And I don't think that we have always been as honest in our education system. I don't think we've been as honest in our public debate about how much the perception of largely white men has changed the opportunities and the realities of a lot of other people.
Right.
And as I got older, as I attained more power, as you said, as I have become more capable of standing from a place of power, I realized two things very early on. One, there is not a single person that is in control of the purse strings who is going to be motivated to change the system to be better for me and you.
That's
their motivation to do that is non-existent. It's just non-existent. And so it becomes it becomes imperative that an outside actor would have to force them through collaboration, through legal loopholes, to actually see that it benefits them to be a better actor. It benefits them to invite more broad ranges of people into the process. And so just a very Cliff Note version of my story is that, when I first went out to raise venture capital for my most recent business endeavor, within the first 3 months of doing so, I was sexually harassed and just really put through an onslaught of trauma by an individual who had wanted to invest in my business. And it was a catalyzing moment for me insofar as I said, if I am what others define me as a tough, intense, ambitious woman who can be intimidating to other people, and this is happening to me, how many other women aren't saying anything, are receiving far more intense assaults at no cause of their own? And how much is this preventing innovation, the advancement of entrepreneurship, the advancement of businesses? And so it just became for me a crystal clear moment of I am strong enough to carry this one, and I am strong enough to have an opinion on this one. And the other thing I will just tell you is the candor clause came to be in large part because I went to, my white male attorney and I said, Charles, you are going to walk to the partners of your law firm and you're going to help me figure out how to do this. And then, by the way, you're going to invite me in to explain to all those people how we're going to move this forward and how we're going to make this more accessible for other people, because you have a role to play. And I think that's the big missing piece for a lot of folks, is that even right now in this moment in time, one of the things that is so inspiring to me is when I see a white male police officer or as is the case in Atlanta, a white chief saying, this is reprehensible, this is not acceptable, and we will change. When people use their power for good, and when people use their privilege for good, it advances the cause in a way that those that are oppressed cannot possibly advance on their own. And that is the piece that I think we so often miss. I've taken it upon myself to invite those folks to say, you can be better.
Right.
And that's how I have the conversation with my venture capitalists too, by the way. I say, hello, investors. Welcome to this is your invitation. I'm inviting you to use your power and your privilege for good. Would you like to try that and see how it feels? And big shock, Shawnee. They love how good it feels. They love how good it feels. And so I don't know that there's any more clear case in my career of just when inviting someone to be on the right side of history and they see how good it feels to be on the right side of history, boy, they change their tune mighty fast.
Right. And that is the outcome of you having the courage and the power to be vulnerable, honestly. Like, people think vulnerability is like weakness, but vulnerability is actually power. Like, to be able to be vulnerable and share because you are strong, because you are perceived as powerful, because you are perceived, whatever strong words you want to attach to it. That's not comfortable for a woman like that to turn around and say, and yeah, you got me. This is what happened to me. And so can you talk about just like you said, it feels good on the other side of what you're leaning into. When you made the decision to take this on, to advocate for a candor clause, to fight back against oppression of women, the injustice that you were up against, what did you think might happen, or what did you fear happening? And then what was the reality of what happened? I have this thing I tell people, I just learned in my life, the biggest things I'm afraid of, I have learned fear is an opposing force that blocks good. So I now know that there's something really powerful on the other side of my fear typically. The more fearful I am, typically the more impactful that is. But what was on the other side for you? And what did you think you were pressing up against? What actually happened versus what you maybe feared?
Yeah. So yeah, my equivalent of that is, the scarier it is for me to say out loud, the more I know I need to examine what it could mean. Because I think that's it's like putting light on it or something.
Right.
I think some context. So the candor clause does two things. When an investor invests in a business, they put together this thing called a term sheet, which is essentially the terms of the deal. And it goes into the term sheet and it outlines essentially two actions. The first is the investor must disclose whether or not they've ever been accused of or successfully prosecuted for any issues related to gender harassment, gender discrimination, or inappropriate workplace behavior. So really just getting a full picture of, have you ever been accused of this? And I'd like to see the specifics of that. The second thing it does is that if there's ever a failure to disclose, so they fail to disclose a situation at work, or they fail to disclose and we were to find out through means of our own, whether that's through the media or through personal relationships, whatever it might be, it allows us, the company, to buy that investor out later at the price they paid during the initial financing. The basic way to think about that is it prevents bad actors from getting rich off my business, which is, I think, the most essential thing to understand. A lot of the issues that came out during Me Too, especially as it pertains to business, is that investors who were actively sexually harassing the CEOs and founders of businesses were walking away from those businesses having 3x, 4x, 5x their money. And to me, they should not be rewarded for being outright wrong in their behavior. So what I feared would happen is that I wouldn't be able to raise money. What I feared is that, there's 88% of accredited investors in the United States of America are men. And I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to raise money because they'd be afraid to talk about it.
Right.
What actually happened was that it did cause some deals to fall through. It did cause some investors to say, you know what, this isn't for me and I don't want to go through this process. But what it also did was it allowed me to have radically different conversations with the other investors that are involved in my business. And so we were able to talk in a very real way about what my value systems are, about what my priorities are as a person, and about the level of respect that I demanded in interacting with me as a founder and with my business overall. And for that alone, I am grateful, because I feel that I have truly honest and real relationships with my investors. And I am also grateful for the fact that I prevented some potentially, I'm not saying those investors that didn't want to get involved with us did anything wrong, but I think what it flagged for me is that we didn't have the same values. Right. We didn't have the same approach to business and life. And these relationships, they're going to last years. I want to make sure that I'm working with folks who have a alignment of values that truly allows all of us to feel like we're in a good relationship.
Which is so important in business. I have a saying that all money is not good money. And so it allowed you to tap into money that would not only be good for you and your spirit as a woman, as a leader, but also good for your company. So before we go to break, do you mind sharing how much money you actually raised? Because it was a boatload of money. And this candid clause, you actually went all the way to Congress, I believe.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh, my Lord, I did. Yeah, it's funny. It's hard to remember that anything happened before coronavirus. So we raised about $5.1 million last year in total. And then we were really honored because we were asked to come testify to Congress about the parameters of the candor clause and its success. And talk about a life affirming moment, Shawnee. I mean, I don't know that I have ever been, one, so honored, and two, so humbled by an experience. It was just an incredible opportunity, and I'm so grateful for it.
Well, and we're grateful for you. You opened up a wellspring of opportunity for minorities and women-owned businesses for years to come that will now be able to not only follow in your footsteps, but be protected as they step into these types of arrangements. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back.
Before you take a break, can I add something? Because
yeah,
I got an email yesterday that I think is actually relevant. So one of the things I've been wanting to do with the candor clause was then now expand it to issues of race and issues LGBTQ issues. Okay. And I've been really struggling to figure out how do I get the frameworks in place to be able to expand it. And so when all of the riots began happening, all the protests began happening in Minneapolis, one of the things that I said to myself is, aha, Liz, this is the moment to go to the attorneys and say, I need you to donate some free time to help me expand the candor clause to include issues of race. And so I'm really proud to say that we are actively working on expanding the candor clause, and it will be totally free and open source for founders of color. And people can sign up to get the most recent version of it at candorclause.com. So when that's out, I'll be really pleased.
Oh man, what an awesome way to end this segment. That just gave me like a super high. And I am so excited to get back to this interview. I really don't even want to take a break, but Kelly, I'm like way over. So I'll take a break and we'll come back and talk more with Liz Giorgi with Soona and Mighteor when we get back from the break.
Does marketing your business right now make you feel overwhelmed? If you answered yes, then you'll love this special offer from Communique-USA. For a limited time, you can work with one of our expert coaches to design a communications plan to help grow your business and engage your customers. We know the nature of business has changed a lot. That's why we're on a mission to save 5,000 small businesses and help you create a clear path forward. Each plan includes a customized communication strategy, a 30-day content calendar, supporting social media posts, and a dedicated coach to guide you every step of the way. Your completed plan and all supporting assets will be delivered within 10 business days, so you can get started right away. And you can spread out the affordable payment over 6 months. So don't delay. Visit mycommunicationsplan.com to reduce stress and take the guesswork out of connecting with your customers. That's mycommunicationsplan.com. mycommunicationsplan.com.
Joy Economics, creating better ways to live, work, and play, is brought to you by Communique-USA, a marketing and communications firm that provides staffing solutions to high-growth, high-stressed teams so they are able to be more productive, efficient, and happy. Learn more at communique-usa.com.
And welcome back to Joy Economics, creating better ways to live, work, and play. We are with Liz Giorgi of Soona and Mighteor, based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have been talking all things equity, equality, justice, using your voice and your power and your influence to lean into the social issues of injustice, and how that tracks, and how Liz was able to use that to make a major impact on the way women are able to engage with venture capitalists. So what I want to do, because I said, the whole point of us rebooting the podcast was to talk about pivoting. Before there was the protesting, the rioting, the George Floyd murder, we were already pivoting and deep in a crisis. And that crisis is still going on, people. We're like, there's a whole pandemic going on behind the backdrop of all of this public outcry. And I can't help but think, the tensions were already there for years and years and years. And then you get people pent up in their houses for 80 and 90 days. We're just like a little, dish. Like all it took was one good drop of oil or grease in the water, and we were ready to explode. And unfortunately, seeing the death of George Floyd, it just kind of lit. It was just that last spark that created the explosion. But what I want to kind of dovetail into is let's get back to the original pivot. The original pivot, and what we're all still pivoting and trying to figure out right now, is how do we put our businesses back together? What do we do if our businesses didn't get hit financially? They've gotten hit because they've started getting too much business. Like there are people who are overflowing with business who weren't prepared, who are as much having to pivot as those that have been impacted and having to reinvent themselves. Can you talk about what you do at Soona, what you do at Mighteor? How has this pandemic impacted your ability to do business? And of all places, now you're in a pandemic doing business in Minnesota in the middle of a riot culture and a racial civil war, for lack of a better term.
Let me start by saying this. I am a creative person at my heart. One of the things that we talk about a lot inside of our company is that constraints breed creativity. That if you are given a lack of resources, if you're a creative person, you'll find a way to make those resources work for you. And walking into COVID, we really leaned into that idea. We said, okay, what are the tools that we have? What are the things that are at the table? Who are the folks that have the unique sight or the unique talent to be able to help us figure out how to change our product? And in one of my businesses, which is Soona, we are a fast casual content studio. So we made it possible for you to come into our studio store, get a headshot, get some new product photos, and we deliver them in 24 hours. And we really said to ourselves, well, how do we deliver at least the product experience online during this time so that people can continue to run their e-com stores, continue to sell their products, and make it an online experience? And I was just absolutely floored by how the team came together and said, we're going to create a virtual shoot experience that allows anyone in the US to ship us their product and have an online shoot safely from wherever they are. And that has resulted in Soona being not only wildly successful right now, but growing very rapidly because there are no other options. People still don't feel safe, coming to set. And candidly, I don't know when people are going to feel safe, gathering in a traditional work setting again. And so that has really allowed us to be very successful at a time that we were not expecting to be, and to also really be there for our employees. One of the things that I really take extremely seriously is my role as an employer, to provide health insurance, to make sure that people can pay their rent and go to the doctor if they get sick. And those things right now have become priority number one. How do we keep this business stable so that our people can take care of themselves? My other business, Mighteor, which I started in 2013. I feel like I had seen a lot of ups and downs. Well, let me tell you, we've never seen a down like this. That business primarily is a production business that goes out and shoots events and national conferences and live streams and things of that nature. That business all evaporated overnight. I tell people, imagine watching $2 million fly out the door overnight. That's what happened. And the real opportunity here for us was, we were basically like, listen, we've got 60 days that we can keep everybody on. Let's see if we can cross-train some folks. We already had an animation team that was really successful and was a growing part of our business. And we put a ton of intention around cross-training some of our teammates to do animation work. And we're kind of all in on animation work. Right. And so it's been difficult. It's been challenging. I'm not going to tell you that we're out of the woods. I think one of the things that has been true in this time is saying we're going to try our best to maintain optimism that we're all capable of learning something new.
Right.
And if you can have that attitude inside of your business, you really can inspire folks to lean into new capabilities. But the thing I keep telling my team every single day is we got to breathe through this. So much of what's interesting to me about work right now is because we're not having human connection, because I'm not going to the office and sharing a coffee with you, or I'm not having lunch with you. We're becoming very, for me, I call it, I become mind-body disconnected because I'm not reminded of the physicality that I have. Yes. And so one of the things that I've really pivoted in my leadership right now is I'm trying to start as many meetings as I can with just a breathing exercise. Everybody together.
I did that last night in a meeting because I could see the tension on people's faces, and we put on a meditation. This was for my writers group that we were doing some Zoom parties, and we had everyone come in. You could literally see shoulders tight, people, faces, everything, and we just switched over to some beach sound meditation music and gave them 9 minutes to kind of respect what's going on in the world, 9 minutes in honor of George Floyd, to just journal and pour out the energy onto the page and breathe and reflect. And 9 minutes later, they were totally different people. It was amazing.
That's amazing. And see, that's so much of what we're talking about can be easily misconstrued as, oh, we just need to talk about how we've pivoted our ability to make money. But what I see this as is an opportunity for me to pivot my ability to be a leader and the ways in which I show up for my team and for myself. I'm embarrassed to say I have never put this much intention around the food that I put in my body as I have the last 10 weeks of my life. Right. And how that changes how I feel and how I show up. And so I see this as a critical moment for so many of us to not just say, well, how do I help my business survive? But how do I actually help myself feel fulfilled and like I'm contributing to the world in a way that is in alignment with my spirit? And it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but it's a welcome challenge and something that we all should be called to rise to.
Thank you so much for listening. And be sure to tune in again for our next episode, where we'll continue this candid conversation with Liz Girogi about business and life and how to proactively respond to what initially seems like life's roadblocks. So we'll see you next time on Joy Economics.
You've been listening to Joy Economics, creating better ways to live, work, and play. To learn more about this episode and other Joy Economics stories, visit joyeconomics.com.